Welcome, everyone. We're really grateful to everyone who registered for today's webinars. My name is Juan Carlos Rodriguez. I am the Education and Outreach Specialist at Florida Organic Growers. Along with Kendra Love, our project manager, we are part of the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the science of Integrated Pest Management for Organic Farms. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Oscar Liburd, who is a professor in the Department of Entomology and Nematology at the University of Florida. I've been very fortunate over the years to work with Dr. Liburd in some projects. He is always a delight to have as part of some of these efforts. He is an entomologist who's very, very knowledgeable about organic practices. And today, I'm sure everyone will learn a lot and enjoy hearing what Dr. Liburd has to say about this topic. But before we do that, we just wanted to acknowledge that this particular webinar and a lot of the work that we're doing through the Transition to Organic Partnership Program wouldn't be possible without the support of the United States Department of Agriculture. The USDA and the Transition to Organic Partnership Program is a program that is an initiative administered by the USDA Agricultural Marketing Services and the National Organic Program. And as part of that program and the efforts, we are concentrating in 5 key programmatic areas, which include farmer-to-farmer mentorship, community building, technical assistance and training, data collection, and workforce training and development. For everyone who has joined us today, if you want to learn more about TOPP, and specifically about the Southeast Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which Florida Organic Growers is the lead in the Southeast region, you can go to this website, www.organictransition.org region/Southeast to learn more about all the work that we are doing through TOPP. And with that, I once again want to thank Dr. Liburd for being with us today. And I'm just going to hand it over to him and we'll listen and learn about some of the exciting things that are happening around integrated pest management. Dr. Liburd.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. I'm going to share my screen. And then just make sure that I'm in presentation mode. Are you seeing my full screen?
Yes.
Okay. Just to give you a brief background on myself and my status here at the university. Originally from St. Kitts Nevis, one of the Caribbean islands. I have a PhD in entomology from the University of Rhode Island. And prior to arriving at the University of Florida, I spent some time at Michigan State doing a postdoc there. And then I became an assistant professor at MSU. And finally, I moved to Florida about 24 years ago. So I've been on the faculty here at the University of Florida for about 24 years. My area of specialization is really small fruits, but I focus a lot on organic agriculture and also organic vegetable production. My challenge today is to talk to you about integrated pest management and also to tell you the close connections and also the tools that we use in organic agriculture, which really came out of some IPM principles. And before we actually get into this, I wanted to talk a little bit or to define IPM. And this is a definition that I've used in my classes here at the University of Florida. It's a very simple definition that I came up with a couple of years ago. And basically it states using a combination of strategies, and some of these strategies just for you to understand, things like monitoring, using cultural techniques, thresholds, using things like biological controls. And in the final analysis, when none of these things work, we tend to use biologically based pesticides. And the idea here behind IPM, and also the same thing with organic agriculture, is to reduce the pest population to an area or to a level where you can manage it. Traditionally, we wanted to get rid of all the pests on the farm, but that is almost impossible because if you try to do that, you would also be getting rid of some beneficial insects as well. And we don't want to get rid of those beneficial insects in the system. So with all these strategies that you're implementing, we wanted to make sure that it's environmentally friendly. We are not impacting the environment in terms of contaminating the soil with pesticides. And also we are not destroying those beneficial insects, some of the pollinators and some of those insects that are really engaged in pest suppression. I wanted to tell you that one of the big difference between IPM or Integrated Pest Management and organic agriculture is that before you can use any type of pesticides in organic agriculture, you must exhaust preventative tactics. We'll talk a little bit about that. And when we talk about preventative tactics, we are talking about those situations or those conditions that prevent the establishment of diseases or pests. For example, choosing an area that is more or less free from pests. If you know that whiteflies are pretty common in a particular area, when you're developing your farming system, you want to move away, if it's possible, you want to choose an area that is not likely to be infested with whiteflies. Just an example. Another good example of preventative tactics is to use something like resistant varieties. Some of these varieties tend to resist certain pests and diseases, and you want to choose those. Cultural techniques. When we talk about cultural techniques, we are talking about changing the conditions or the environmental conditions, maybe the soil. For example, in the soil, you may want to use mulches. You may want to use maybe a reflective mulch or a living mulch. We will talk about this later on. And basically what you're doing, you're changing the environment in which the crop is growing. So cultural techniques also is really important. And finally, biological control. We have quite a bit of information on biological control here, but this is using one insect to destroy the pest. And I'll explain more about that later on because we have different types of biological control. So basically, before you can implement the use of a pesticide in organic agriculture, you must exhaust these three topics: preventative tactics, cultural techniques, and biological control. Now, some people would tell you that, oh, you can't use pesticides for organic pest management. You can. Where you have a persistent, a very frequent pest that comes in almost every single year, and where there are no other techniques to manage this pest, as long as you have explored preventative, cultural, and biological control techniques, yes, you can use pesticides. And we're going to come to some of those pesticides later on in this presentation. Just want to talk a little bit about some basic requirements of organic systems. The seeds and other planted materials must be obtained from certified organic sources. The crops are grown on certified organic lands. You must keep a detailed recording that tracks all of the products you're using on the farm, and you should track these products up to the time of marketing. And you must maintain buffer zones between conventional farms and organic farms. And most of these buffer zones, USDA doesn't tell you exactly how big the buffer zone should be. In other words, USDA doesn't tell you it should be 25 feet or 50 feet or whatever. My recommendation to a lot of growers is to have about, if it's possible again, because sometimes you don't have the land space or the acreage, but it's nice to leave between 75 to 100 feet between conventional systems and organic systems to make sure that there's no spray drift and contamination and so forth. Some of the common practices that we use in organic agriculture are things like cover crops, and I'll talk a little bit more about this shortly. We use mulches, and some of the mulches that we can use is live-in mulch. Sometimes we have organic mulch like straw mulch or pine bark. Pine bark is used quite extensively in the Southeast for things like blueberry pest management, pine bark. Straw mulch is used in many crops like, for example, strawberries and so forth. We could also use intercropping, and this is a common practice in small scale agriculture, but also some large scale agriculture tends to have intercropping, and intercropping has some direct benefits because you don't have a monoculture system. It tends to confuse the pest, and it can result in the final analysis of low pest suppression. You can also use insectary plants, and you can see um, one example of an insectary plant here on the slide. Um, and the thing about this one here, which is sweet Elysium, uh, it tends to attract a lot of beneficial insects to the system, and this helps you suppress some key pests within the system. Crop rotation can be used, obviously. Crop rotation, one of the big benefits is that you don't allow a pest population to build up, whether it's a soil-borne pest or foliar pest, to build up once you practice crop rotation, because these different crops that you're going to be using, they have different pest complex. Monitoring is key to any organic agriculture. You have to monitor the pest complex. We usually recommend what we call weekly monitoring, but if you can monitor even more often than weekly, that would be very good. The more often you monitor, the less likely for you to have a pest outbreak. And again, as I just said a while ago, you can use natural pesticides. Let's talk a little bit about cover crops. There's a lot of talk about the use of cover crops, and cover crops definitely, there's some benefits. Here you can see a cover crop. This is sorghum Sudan in the background there. And you can see when you look at this graph, at least on the vertical axis, you can see some of the benefits and the let me put it this way, the longer the graph, or or the bigger the graph or the bar, it tells you the more benefit you can get from using this particular cover crop. If you look at the graph here, it says below 1, there is hardly any benefits. Above 1, I would say between 1 and 3, there is a lot of benefits of using cover crops. One of the biggest benefit we can see here, is that increases overall soil health also, and soil health is really important because you can't have a healthy beneficial insect population unless you have healthy soils. It reduces soil erosion. It increases soil organic matter, and these are direct benefits of having cover crops within the system. At almost the very bottom, the second to the last point there, it says control insects, and that is so true. A lot of people think that if you use cover crops, you can get a lot of benefits in terms of pest suppression, insect suppression. The work we have done so far, there is definitely pest suppression. Whether or not it is extremely significant, we're not too sure about that. And I'll show you one example of some work that we did in strawberries. Here you can see that we were looking at 4 different cover crops here. The x-axis shows AV, which means American joint vetch. CB is Crototalia breviflora, which is another cover crop. We have sun hemp, SH, and then we have WC, which is a weed control. In other words, we didn't do anything to that particular area. It's just a standard weed control. And we have HI, means hairy indigo. So these at the bottom on the x-axis represent cover crop with the weed control. On the y-axis, the one on the left shows you um, two-spotted spider mite population in strawberries. And the one on the right shows you a predator, which is Neosilius californicus. This is one of the predators that we use in strawberries to manage two-spotted spider mites. Now, if you look across the graph, well, before I tell you that, the black bar represent two-spotted spider mite, and the ashy bar represent TSM eggs. The bar on top, which is the line bar on top, the line on top represent, or the solid line on top represent the predatory mite, and the dotted line on top represent predatory mites. Predatory mites. Now, if you look across the entire graph, in terms of the height of the bar, that's how we measure TSM population and also TSM eggs. Again, the black represent the two-spotted spider mite population, whereas the ashtray represent the TSM eggs. But if you look right across, you'll see no differences among the cover crop that we use in terms of suppressing two-spotted spider mite population. No differences at all whatsoever. And this was kind of sort of surprising because we thought that, and these cover crop, we grow them in the summer, we plow them back into the soil, and we left them there for about probably about 8 weeks before we plant, 8 to 10 weeks before we actually planted the strawberries. Mind you, this was done over 2 seasons, and we did not see any major benefit of the cover crop for pests, for two-spotted spider mite population. Maybe if we were to do this, but however, the soil was improved, soil structure, soil texture was improved, and there were some direct benefits of having these, in terms of soil nutrients, these cover crops. Maybe if we were to leave this cover crop over maybe 5 seasons, then we may have seen some differences in terms of pest suppression. But one of the things that we saw is that for the hairy indigo, there was a little increase in terms of the number of predatory mites that was in the system, which was Neosilius californicus. That was good news because it tells me that, and that may be a function of just what happened in the system, but but hairy indigo tend to accommodate more predatory mites than the other treatments that we use, the other cover crops that we use in the system. But again, the overall theme here is that there were no direct benefits of using the cover crop in this system here for pest suppression. When it comes to companion plants, and this is some work that we recently published, this one is back in 2022, and we also published something back in 2024 as well, to looking at companion plants, and basically what is happening here is that there are direct benefits of using companion plants within the system. Just to give you some background, we looked at squash, zucchini squash, and this is one of the, Florida is one of the largest producers of squash in the US. We probably get 29% of total US production, and it's valued about $63 million. The entire US production is about 215 million US dollars. Regardless, squash production is sort of handicapped because of these three different pests. The most important one is called the silverleaf whitefly, but we also have thrips sometimes in squash. We also have the melon aphid. And if you grow squash like now, in the late spring, summer, the pest that you would see, at least in Gainesville area, would be melon aphid. You see a lot of aphids. But if you grow squash in the fall, I would say from August all the way down until November, you'll find quite a bit of silverleaf whitefly. And silverleaf whitefly is detrimental to the fact that you may not get any marketable yields. Just to tell you a little bit more about silverleaf whitefly, it's a major vegetable pest. I'll show you some of the crops that it attack. And we have a complex of about 40 species, and you cannot distinguish among these species because they all look alike. The one that we have mostly in Florida is called Bemisia tibaceae. It's from the Middle East, and we have field populations throughout the entire state, Bemisia bassii. Sometimes, very rare cases, you have a greenhouse whitefly, which is a different species, but very rarely occurs here in Florida. Just to show you the pest complex or some of the crops that silverleaf whitefly attack. You have squash, which is a big one, probably one of the main one, cucumber, watermelon, tomato, eggplant, it even getting to some of the cruciferous pests, plants, like, for example, the cabbage and and broccoli. Beans also is affected significantly by the silverleaf whitefly. On squash, one of the biggest problem, or two biggest problems we have in squash is one which is referred to as you call squash silverleaf symptoms. And you can see the white leaf in the picture there, and the white leaf represents squash silverleaf. The reason why it's called silverleaf because the leaf appears to be silver. And then the biggest problem we have with silverleaf whitefly, it transmits diseases. And the disease you're looking at is something they call cucurbit leaf crumble disease virus. It's caused by a virus, cucurbit leaf crumble. And sometimes the entire field can be devastated because of this particular disease. We first saw it in Florida, actually in one of my research plot down in Citra in 2008. And since that, this has expanded throughout the state and it's become a major problem throughout Florida and also in Georgia. Another secondary problem we have from silverleaf, sometimes it excretes honeydew, which causes sooty mold on the plant itself. Now, again, because this is a persistent pest, you can use some of the products that's labeled for organic use to manage it. And I'm giving you some products here, Pyganic. Yeah, it is okay when it comes to suppressing it. MPED is very effective. In fact, we were able to show this a couple of years ago, back in 2017, 2018, that MPED was the most effective pesticide that can be used to suppress whiteflies in an organic system. Azera tends to work too, but again, Azera knocks down some of the beneficial insects. So we try to refrain from Azera. MPED works, is very compatible with a lot of the beneficial insects that we have in the system. Now, we wanted to look at MPED, which is an effective pesticide in the organic system for dealing with whiteflies. And we also wanted to look at some of the other companion plants. For example, we looked at marigold, and we know that marigold is very good in the system because it has nematicidal activity. We use it a lot in the cropping system because it reduces nematodes. And also another benefit, it attracts some of the beneficial insects and so forth. We also wanted to look at cowpea because one of the things that cowpea tends to fix nitrogen in the soil, which would reduce the farmer's intake of fertilizers and so forth. And the big thing about cowpea too, it attracts pollinators. And squash tends to benefit quite a bit from these pollinators. So we did initial work in the greenhouse, and although we had the companion plants in the greenhouse, we really did not see the benefit in the greenhouse. This is how the study was set up, where we looked at marigold, cowpea, marigold and cowpea, which is a mix of both marigold and cowpea. We had MPED, which is the same pesticide, which I told you is very effective, and we have an untreated, and these were all grown in pots in the greenhouse, and we sample this on a weekly basis. This is how the system was sort of set up in the greenhouse. The plastic containers separated the different treatments, so we don't have any treatment interference. And from the greenhouse work, when we finished the greenhouse work, we thought that, okay, the companion plants, which is marigold, cowpea, and the mix between cowpea and marigold were not working. But we found out something completely different when we went to the field with this. From the graph, if you look at the graph again on the x-axis, you have the treatments, which shows the companion plants and the pesticide, and on the y-axis you have the number of whiteflies, and then on the other axis, on the right side, on the right y-axis, you have symptoms rating. This is silverleaf symptoms rating, and you can see that the only thing that worked in the greenhouse was the MP'd that worked there. So we moved the research to the field, and this is some of the field plots we have here. And you can see on the left-hand side here, African marigold intercrop with squash. And then you see cowpea there, intercrop with squash. We have a mix of African marigold and cowpea. We have areas where we just use the MP'd, and then we had some untreated areas there. And this is basically how it was set up in the field, these big plots. These were huge plots that we had with these different treatments. We use a randomized complete block design. And we counted the number of insects using sticky traps, and also we did what we call in situ counts, which is counting the insects directly in the field to see what the population level was, the whitefly population was. And the results were completely different to what we saw in the greenhouse. In fact, both the marigold, the cowpea, and the mix between marigold and cowpea performed as well as the MP'd in the field. The reason for this is still unclear. I think because the work was done in the greenhouse in pots, and there was a small amount of these marigold and cowpea and so forth, and where we had only maybe 2 or 3 squash plants and small amount of these companion plants, the effect did not show up as much. But in the field, we did see some big effects of using these companion plants. You can see there again that we had significant suppression compared with the control when we look at the number of adult whiteflies. And this work was published in 2023. One of the big benefits that we saw from using some of these companion plants, you can see there is that we had quite a bit of beneficial insects. I'm not going to go into, because you guys are not entomologists, but we saw parasitoids, quite a bit of parasitoids that tend to regulate the population. In other words, suppress the population of whiteflies. And these were captured on sticky traps. And some of them, we counted them in situ as well, too. When we look at silverleaf disorder, and silverleaf, if you look on the right, you see that that leaf with some silvering on it. When we collected leaves, and basically what we did, we collected the leaves. As on the left, you can see the leaves, and we puncture these discs, and we look at them under the microscope, and we saw these immature whiteflies, or what we call the young whiteflies, the larval stage of the whiteflies. And these were the ones that are really responsible for what we call the silverleaf developing on the leaf itself. So we wanted to know, to look at the population of these immature whiteflies. And I think I have a graph here that shows, yes, this table actually shows the number of immature. When we say nymphal whiteflies per leaf, it means the number of immature whiteflies, or nymphal whiteflies we call them. And if you look down the screen, you'd realize the last down the table here, we have squash control, and it has an A, means that it's higher than every single one, with the exception of the MP'd. A and A is in MP'd and squash. I'm trying to show you exactly, so that there are no difference between the control and where we use the MP'd. But when we look at the mixed planting, the cowpea and the marigold, we had lower population of these immature whiteflies. So these companion plants, they were really benefiting a lot in terms of suppressing the number of immature whiteflies. And again, these were the ones that caused the silver leafing on the plant itself. And then we did some more chemistries where we look at the volatile profiles in the field to figure out, how these companion plants are suppressing the whitefly population, and we find quite a bit of terpenes in the field. We found high amounts of limonene, and limonene is a repellent. It's a natural repellent for things like whiteflies. We find high amounts of dihydrotagetone, and again, these are repellents mostly for whiteflies. So there's some chemistry behind the use of flowering plants in terms of suppressing whitefly population. When we look at marketable yield, and again, we have both marketable and unmarketable yields. If you look at the unmarketable, those are the deformed squashed. Marketable are those that looks pretty much uniform. We saw that the marigold, in fact, had significantly higher yield than the mixed plantain, which is the mix of the cowpea and the marigold. It had higher yields than the MP and quite significantly higher than the control. So marigold tends to work fairly well. Cowpea work well in the system as well too. In fact, there were no differences between the cowpea, the mix, and to some extent the MP. But marigold had significantly higher yield than the rest of the companion plants that we use in the system. So some of the findings here is that MP treated plots had the lowest number of whiteflies, especially in the greenhouse. The problem is that we did not see this in the yield. In the field, all treatments reduce whitefly below the control. We think that there was a masking effect from the companion plants, which reduces the operation of the whitefly. And the best companion plant we used in the system was marigold in this case. I just wanted to talk a little bit about pesticides that can be used in organic agriculture because, again, we use this as a last resort, but we tend to use these sometimes when there is no other options to manage the pest population. And there you can see BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, it's been around for a very, very long time, since I was a graduate student. And it's used mostly to control Lepidopteran pests. When I said Lepidopteran, I'm talking about moths. If you have a lot of things like moth, diamondback moth, fall armyworm, and so forth, you can still use BT to control those things, and it's registered for organic use. Entrust is a spinosad, belong to the spinosad group, and it's not new, but it's been around for some time as well. And this is one of the newer relatively newer compared to Bacillus thuringiensis that is used to control some of the same Lepidopteran pests in the system, especially in organic agriculture. Grandivo is the newest one, and but Grandivo, unlike things like Entrust and BT, it's more of a general use pesticide. You can use it against beetles. You can use it against true bugs. You can use it against even white flies. You can use it. It's a more general use pesticide as compared to things like Entrust and Bacillus. And then the traditional botanicals that we have used in the past, things like Paganic. Neem is a insect growth regulator and also a repellent to some extent. Sabadilla and Rhyme. These are compounds that we have used for decades. It's all registered for organic use. Azera is one of the newer ones, and it's a combination of neem and Paganic. It's better than using Paganic by itself and neem by itself. So sometimes we want benefits of both, and so we tend to use Azera. Horticultural oils can also be used to suppress key pests like whiteflies. The problem with horticultural oils is that once the temperature, especially in the southeast, gets above 85 degrees, you can burn your plants very easily. So you have to be very careful with the use of horticultural oils. Soaps, they are very good, again, for whiteflies. If you have whiteflies and tomatoes, MP, again, is excellent. That's one of the best ones we have for whitefly management, especially in squash and tomatoes and so forth. And sometimes when you have mite problems, you can use sulfur. Diatomaceous earth is a more general use compound or pesticide as well, and you can use it a lot to control like bugs, stink bugs, and things of that nature. Um, Many of these compounds don't work as well as the conventional products, but this is the best that we have in organic agriculture. I wanted to talk a little bit about biological control, and we have different types of biological control. When we talk about classical biological control, we're talking about bringing something from outside and using it in an area that is relatively new to the pest. So, for example, if we have a pest in Gainesville and we want to use classical biological control for it, we're going to go outside. When I say outside, we are not only thinking about outside Gainesville. We're talking about outside of the country, finding something out there that works against the pest and make sure it doesn't affect anything else. And we will bring that into the country and we would release it. But before it is released in the system, there's a lot of testing that has to be done to make sure it doesn't attack anything else. None of the related families of the plants, none of the related families of the insect, and so on and so forth. But classical biological control is used. We have had some early successes with biological control. Right now, we are trying to use a biological control agent to control a big pest they call spotted wing Drosophila, which is a pest that attack a lot of small fruits. Augmentation is what most people who does organic agriculture tend to use. And basically what they do, they order these beneficial insects from these different companies, and they release them on their farm. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work, and sometimes they don't work because of many different factors. And conservation and enhancement, I always tell people this is often overlooked, but it's one of the best systems you can use to manage pest population. And the reason why is because you're not bringing in something into a new environment when you talk about conservation and enhancement. All you're doing, you're promoting those activities to increase the population of what you already have there. For example, we know that some pesticides, I'm talking about organic pesticides in this case, reduces, Azera, I think I just mentioned it a while ago, reduces, has negative effects on some pollinators and also negative effects on some beneficial insects. So you would avoid using things like Azera, and those would build the population of these naturally occurring biological control agents that you have in the system there. Just to show you briefly some of the pests that you have, some of the beneficial insects that you have, and some of them you can order them on, actually most of them I'm showing you, you can order them online. You have hoover flies, some people call it flower flies. I sometimes refer to them as syrphids. They're very good at controlling things like aphids and scale insects. And then you have a minute parrot bug. They're really good at controlling things like thrips. They have done some remarkable things on minute parrot bugs, especially in things like tomatoes and peppers in controlling thrips. The green lace wing is also, and I'm showing you the adult here, but the larval stage is what actually controls the pests. But you can measure the abundance of the larvae by the number of adults that you have in the system. Again, the larvae feeds on things like aphids and thrips. It also feeds on some of the Lepidoptera and other moth eggs that you have. The same thing with the syrphid fly that I first mentioned, the hoover flies or the flower flies. The larvae is what actually does most of the suppression. It feeds on things like aphids and scale insects. Big-eyed bug, this is a very common. If you want to go outside right now, you'll find a bunch of big-eyed bugs. They're all over the place. And they're very fond of feeding on things like moth eggs. Um, Again, we tend to have a lot of what we call coleopterans, ladybird beetles. Some of them tend to work, but a lot of times when you release them into the field, they tend to stray and go to other places. But they're very effective in reducing things like aphids and scale insects. And sometimes when you have high population, they tend to feed on things like spider mites. One of the ladybug that's really good at whitefly management is something they call Delphastus. And you have two different species. The one that you can order most times is Delphastus pusillus. And this is very good in suppressing things like whiteflies, especially in the greenhouse. It tends to work outside as well too, but it's not as well outside as in the greenhouse. Ground beetles, I don't think you can order this very easily, but these are beneficial common predators, and they tend to feed a lot on things like cabbage maggot. They feed on weed seeds, and they also feed on things like mutts and so forth. What we have been using quite a bit for commercial agriculture is mites and predatory mites. And I'm showing you three examples here. One is called Phytocilius pessimilis, another one is called Neosilius californicus, and the other one is called Ambicillus swisskyii. The one that we have been using quite a bit for whitefly management is referred to as Ambicillus swisskyii. Neosilius californicus is used a lot in strawberries. In fact, I think Neosilius californicus is a more sustainable predatory mite in the system than the Phytocilius pessimilis. If you have a lot of mites in your field and you want to knock down the population very quickly, you want to go with something like, which is referred to as Phytocilius pessimilis. They operate almost like a pesticide. But the problem with Phytocilius pessimilis, once the population is knocked down, they don't feed on anything else, so they would die off. Neosilius californicus, if the population is knocked down, the two-spotted spider mite population is knocked down, they would feed on other things besides the mites. They feed on things like nectar and pollen and so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you an experiment where we use Ambicillus swisskyii. I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. Just a little bit of background about this predatory mite that we have used in squash for controlling whiteflies. It's from Turkey or the Middle East, and it's a generalist. In other words, it not only feeds on whiteflies, but it feeds on things like thrips. In fact, it was more marketed for thrips than whiteflies, but we have been using it extensively for whitefly management. And you can apply it to prevent the whitefly or the thrips from coming into the field, or you can apply it after the whitefly or the thrips are in the field itself. This is an example where we have some sweet alyssium next to, this is on a grower farm, sweet alyssium next to some squash. We were wondering if the sweet alyssium would encourage the predator, which is the Ambicillus swisskyii, to stay more in the field when we were doing this experiment. Sweet alyssium did harbor quite a bit of other beneficial insects and also pollinators, but whether or not it performed well in terms of keeping the Ambicillus swisskyii in the field, I'm not sure it did that. This is just showing you what the field looked like. These different lines, you see the control treatment where we did not apply anything at all. All we have is different varieties of squash. We had the dark green is called cash flow, the light green is called zephyr, and the yellow is called gold rush, and the light yellow is called gold rush, and the dark yellow is called sweet alyssium. If you see the red bar in the middle, this is where we released the Ambicillus swisskyii. And the funny thing about it is that we were expecting it to move up and down the rows, the Ambicillus swisskyii, but it not only moved up and down the rows, but it moved so much, it moved all the way over into the control treatment. So all of the insects that we were expecting, or the naturally occurring whiteflies in the control, the actual Ambicillus swisskyii went over there and controlled them. When they finished feeding on all of the whiteflies in the treatment area, they went into the control area and controlled the insects over there as well. So this tells us, in fact, I have a graph here showing that the Ambicillus swisskyii was able to move 54 feet, which is a long distance for a small little mite to move within the field. So they're very effective. They move a lot within the field, and they can move around the field and suppress your pest population. This is a graph that shows you pretty quickly what is going on here. It shows that what the control, we have the predator at the bottom and the whitefly population on top. We did 2 releases of the predator at the bottom. That's why it says release 1 and release 2. But if you look at the control and the treatment, you see the dark yellow represent high population of whitefly. And where we apply the predator, you can see that the dark yellow or the red spot, which represent high population, it actually disappears almost very quickly. And this occurs throughout the entire season, indicating that the predatory mite, Ambicillus swisskyii, was working very well in the system. It also shows you that here in the control, where we had high population of whitefly eggs, whiteflies immatures or larval stages, and also predators, when you look at the control and the treatment, you can see the big difference here in terms of suppressing silverleaf disorder. The same thing we saw in other situation here. And basically what we found here is that Ambacillus wiskii was a very effective biological control agent that can be used to suppress whiteflies in squash. Just quickly, I want to talk a little bit about diamondback moth and also other insects that responds to attract and kill. I'm just showing you the life cycle of the diamondback moth here. I'm not going to get into it, but basically what they do, the larvae tends to feed on these cabbage, and diamondback moth is a big problem in cabbage, and it tends to create these window panes or these holes in cabbage. It's a significant pest, one of the most important pests in the world, the diamondback moth. But we have developed what we call an attract and kill system to control things like the diamondback moth. This is used extensively in IPM, but this can also be used in organic agriculture, I should say. You can see the compound that we have is called Actra prutella. This is not on the market yet, but it would be on the market very, very shortly. And Actra prutella is basically an attractant. And what we did, we got the cabbage volatile, so we extract it into a compound which is referred to Actra prutella, and we use this as an attractant to attract the diamondback moth. And this is wrapped into an insecticide, which is Entrust. The Entrust is labeled for organic use. So the attractant, which is the cabbage volatiles or the Actra prutella, would attract the diamondback moth to the field. And when it comes to feed, the pesticide would kill it, which is the spinosad or the Entrust would kill it. So that's why it's called attract and kill. It attracts it first and then eventually kills it. This is a technology that has been developed quite a bit in IPM, and it's now being used in organic agriculture. And this is only one example. There are numerous examples that can be used in organic agriculture. Just wanted to show you the difference here between using, this is the one on the right is showing you the cabbage plus cabbage leaf plus the Actra prutella. The one in the middle is showing you just the cabbage leaf, and the one at the end is not showing you anything but pure air. And you can see the big difference between the one in the middle and the one on the right. The one on the right shows significant differences in terms of the attraction of the diamondback moth compared to where you just use pure cabbage leaf alone. So this tells you how attractive the compound is. And this is something that we are trying to develop to kill major pests like the diamondback moth. I just wanted to show you another graph here. This graph shows, if you look at the green, everything within the green, these are all compounds registered for organic use. We have Entrust, Azera, we have Entrust, Actra prutella, which is the attractant from the cabbage leaf, and we have Entrust, Actra prutella plus Azera. And these compounds were all rotated. Again, Entrust and Azera, Entrust and Actra prutella, Entrust, Actra prutella, and Azera. We compare this with traditional compounds or conventional compounds that is being used to control things like diamondback moth. And surprisingly, you realize that Entrust and Actra prutella perform much better than those conventional compounds. So this has a lot of potential to be used in the future for things like diamondback moth. The very last topic I'm going to bring in is a recent development in Florida here, and it's a pest outbreak of a new pest. Back in 2023, I was called down in the Caribbean island of Antigua, which is adjacent to where I'm from, which is St. Kitts Nevis. And they had this new pest that arrived in Antigua, and it was attacking not only Antigua, but some other Caribbean islands. And they did not know what it was. This is the senior extension officer in Antigua I was talking to there, and he was showing me all these fields in Antigua that was devastated because of this new pest that came into the country. And basically what I did is to collect some, because I was actually working for the University of Florida, but I was working independently by myself. So I collected some samples there and I brought them back to the US. I wanted to know exactly what this pest was. And what I found out was that there's a new pest that attacked the Caribbean, which is called two-spot cotton leaf hopper, and that is the insect right there. And this was causing the devastation, not only to okra, but it's also attacking the sorrel and the cabbage, the eggplant, and all these different pests down there. It was attacking. And they were very concerned about it because Antigua is a tourist destination, and the hotel industry depends quite a bit on some of the local produce, the fresh local produce, and a lot of their crops they were losing it because of this new pest. So we were able to get it identified with the help of the Division of Plant Industry. Susan Halbert helped me with the identification, and we were able to report this back to the islands in the Caribbean. But interesting thing is that this originated in the Asia in Southeast Asia, and also you can see sources of origin here in Southeast Asia, and it happened to made it all the way over to Antigua. And when I talked to the folks there, they told me that they had a hurricane in the fall of 2023, and it's shortly after the hurricane that they realized that this new pest was there and it was devastating all of the agricultural crops. Interestingly, this pest arrived in Florida last November, and this is some results from Florida. The map of Florida shows you where they found it so far in Florida. It's the population is relatively big down in Dade County. The number 12 means there are 12 places in Dade County there where they found it. As you come back north, you can see two places in places like Collier County and again, the number represent, but when you look up here in Gainesville, Alachua County, they found it in two different places and so forth, all the way up to Jackson County. There were two occurrences of it. But this is coming to your farm, wherever you are, and especially if you grow things like okra and things like if you have cotton, obviously it's going to attack you, and some of the eggplants and other crops that you grow. But I'm going to give you an idea some of the crops that they found it on in Florida: okra, nightshade, cotton, eggplant, hibiscus, and so forth. These were all locations or records from Florida where they found this new pest. This graph here shows you the effects on things like cotton. You can see the leaf burn, the hopper leaf burn there, and it's very devastating to things like cotton. So the Panama area in Florida that grows a lot of cotton, this is going to be a serious pest for them to manage. Um, just for your interest, if you grow any one of these crops, cotton, groundnut, pigeon peas, sorghum, cowpea, maize, mung bean, okra, cotton, tomato, and so forth, all of these are likely to be a likely host of this actual pest itself. We did, with the help of Susan Halbert and the extension agent for the University of Florida, we did release a pest alert so that people in Florida are aware of this new pest that's going to be on your farm very shortly. So you can get a copy of this pest alert and you can eventually read about it and see how to manage this pest itself. But my very last slide I'm showing here is some activities that we have planned for for the 2025-2026 season. We plan to do some surveillance of it to see exactly where it is in Florida, continue some surveillance. We are doing developing some monitoring protocols. In other words, try to figure out the best tools to find it in the field. So we are looking at different trap types and so forth. We're also looking at some chemistries that can be used in organic agriculture, things like Azera, MPED, and so forth that can be used for controlling this pest. But we are developing pest management programs to control this new pest that we have in Florida. And this is my last slide. This is my lab. I want to thank my lab because my lab is very important in terms of helping me to do all this research that I have done over the last couple of years. And the lab changes very often because students tend to graduate, but this is my last batch here. batch of students, and they have done an excellent job in terms of helping me to manage some of the pests that we manage, both in organic system and conventional system. Um, I have my contact information. I'll provide that shortly, but that's all the information I have, at least for now. Let me see if I can stop sharing here. Hello, are you there? Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
Yes,
Dr.
yes.
Liburd,
Uh-huh.
thank you so much for such a
Hmm.
really wonderful presentation.
Hmm.
Definitely, I think it's for me especially. I'm not an entomologist, but I always get excited learning more about pest management and many of the things that you discussed today. It's certainly something that I hope that everyone who's joined us today uh, will find it very useful.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask Kendra to maybe read some of the questions
That we have in there.
that the audience has asked. Kendra, do you want to ask read some of the questions?
Yes, and thank you again, Dr. Liburd. I know one of the questions was, are we going to be sharing a recording of this presentation? And yes, we will
Yes.
be doing that. One of the questions that came in, I think it was from the beginning of your presentation,
Mhm.
is pyganic considered compatible with beneficial insects?
Well, it is compatible depending on how you use it. If you apply pyganic and then you apply it over beneficial insect, it would kill them. But if you apply pyganic and 2 or 3 days after, I would say 3 days after for sure, it would have no effect. And you release your beneficial insects, you have no effect on beneficial insects. But if you try to spray it over those beneficial insects, it would definitely suppress some of them or kill some of them. Yeah. So what we always recommend is that the growers, the if you have a high pest pressure, you apply pyganic first, and a couple of days after, I would say 3 days to be sure, then you release your beneficial insects in the field. Yeah.
Thank you. And similarly with the ACTRA, I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Actua patella. Hmm.
Yes, would you, so two questions. One is, would you apply that directly to the crop? And the second question, could there be a concern that it might attract more moths to the area?
That's a very good question. First of all, you're not applying it to the crop. The way the technology is very, very small amount. They're small, it's almost like a drop of Actra. We want a drop or two we want to use per plant, and that has sufficient attractant in there to pull the pest in. No, well, I am speculating that the farm would have a border and it is not capable of pulling things from outside of the border to within the field itself. You can pull things from around the field, it's around the actual cabbage plot itself, but not from outside of that border. And the border is usually about 10 to 15 feet. No, it cannot do that.
Right. And then with moths, would there be potential in attracting more moths by using, would that be a
You'll be
concern of
attracting,
us?
you'll be attracting moths from within the system itself, from within the organic system. There's no record of us, even though we have monitored this population, attracting moths from outside of the field. We don't have any evidence it does that. Yeah. Bearing in mind that you're not planting right next to a lot of the wild hosts and so forth, where the adults may live. We are thinking that if you have a field, you're going to be planting at least 10 feet from the actual border itself, if you understand what I'm saying.
Thank you.
And those wild hosts tend to be very active in the adjacent fields or in the adjacent greenery. And definitely there would be moths in those places, but because you're planting away from it, we don't think you're attracting any into the actual field itself.
I have a question related to
Yeah.
the product, Dr. Liburd, because I think you mentioned,
Mhm.
is it, it's a fairly new product, and
Yes.
is it also something you're testing right now?
Yes.
Is it OMRI approved already, or do you know if it's going to be?
It's going through the process of being UMRI approved. In fact, it's well, right now things are on hold because of problems, I should say, with EPA and so forth. But uh, earlier this year, it was going through the approval process of being UMRI approved. This is something that we're hoping we can get it on the market as soon as possible. I understand it's now being used in Brazil. I don't know how true that is, but I understand it's now being used in Brazil for diamondback moth. The United States tend to take a little longer in terms of putting things on the market, but it will be on UMRI approved. Yes, it's the volatile that we are using from the cabbage itself. It's not a pesticide or anything of that nature. Yeah.
Um, and just in relation to that, because you said it several times, uh, was that since a lot of these products are used as a last line of defense in the
Yes.
table of attractant,
Hmm.
that may not be necessarily the case. Are you using it after all of the other practices, even though it's an attractant, have not worked? Do you use
Well,
it as a preventive? I mean, how is it being used exactly, and
that
when?
that
I guess.
that's an excellent question again. You see, pesticides are considered a last resort, and it should be used after all of the other measures have been exhausted. Uh, I don't think an attract and kill falls into the same category as
Correct.
a regular pesticide.
Correct.
So I think you should be able to use it earlier in the system. But this is something I would like to check on.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
track and kill is completely different to applying a pesticide across the field, if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That was the reason why I was
Yeah.
raising that question to see
Yeah.
how you were using. And for everybody that's listening, I just wanted to also, because we've been, or Dr. Library has been talking about again,
Hmm.
allow pesticides.
Hmm.
And for those that maybe are not as familiar with where it is that you can find this information, I urge you to look at the OMRI website. OMRI is the Organic Materials Review Institute. If you Google, and it's a simple sort of URL, omri.org, you can actually go to the OMRI page and write the brand name of a particular product. Somebody mentioned Pyganic just a minute ago, and see whether, because maybe not all forms of Pyganic are allowed, which is another thing
Yes.
that is always
That
very important to point out, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that happens almost with every single thing. You have to make sure that the one that you plan to use is allowed. Because, for example, we know that plastic mulch, and it's not all types of plastic is allowed. So you have to make sure you look at that list to see which one is allowed for organic
Yeah,
use. Almost with every single thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Kendall, were there any other questions?
Yes, we did have one. Um, so regarding the marigolds that you spoke of at the
Hmm.
beginning, were you referring to African marigold or
Yes.
French marigold?
That's an excellent question again. The one that we use in our study was really African marigold. I am not sure if the French marigold, well, I can't say that. The results may vary with French marigold, but the one that we used in our study was African marigold. Yes, excellent question. Yeah, the different varieties of marigold has different amount of volatiles being exuded from the plant. So, but the one that we used was recommended to us, and I think we use African marigold.
And then we did have one more question about the leafhopper. Do you
Mhm.
think any common beneficial insects might prey on that new
Well, the eggs are preyed on some of the naturally occurring things like big-eyed bugs and the minute parrot bugs that I showed you. The eggs are being preyed on by those things. But in terms of having a natural biological control, I think there is some work in India using. I don't want to say because I'm not 100% sure, using a beneficial insect to control it. We have not done any work in the West because this is a new pest for us, looking at biological control. But this is something that we plan to explore. As I said, this insect just arrived in Florida in November last year, so we have less than 6 months. In fact, we had our first workshop on this in May, on May the 8th, which is not even a month ago, our first workshop. Oh, yes, it's over a month ago. Yes, about 6 weeks ago, we had our first workshop looking at this particular pest. And then we were able to put together this pest alert earlier this year. And we just want people to be in tune that this is a new pest and it's coming to your farm. It's just a matter of time before it arrives on your farm. Yeah.
So related to that, can they continue to monitor or find out what it is that's going on by visiting your website, or what are some of the, maybe, I don't know if there's more questions, Dr. Liburd, but if you had some final thoughts, tips
Mhm.
for
Well,
everyone.
I figured maybe by the end of the year we would have something in terms of management that we can recommend. Right now we're just saying use synthetic pesticides, but we don't know how any of these things work. I know I'm collaborating with a colleague of mine right now, and he has a student who is looking at different types of reduced risk pesticides and so on for managing this particular pest. The problem is that a lot of these people that are trying to do something right now, they're not doing organic agriculture work. It's only people like myself who does a lot of organic agriculture. So until we have like a big population like in Gainesville, right now we find in two sites in Gainesville, and I don't think we have found more than five. But and it's almost impossible to do any research on five insects. But as long as we get an established population in the Gainesville area, we would start doing more research, hands-on research. But in the meantime, what I can do is just collaborate with people down south at the research station and who are doing conventional type research on this particular pest. Yeah. In Antigua, when I was in Antigua, by the way, they were asking me if I can come back and do one of the big pesticide trials down. It's something I've thought about, but I have not done that yet.
Well, any final thoughts? Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to all of us on this webinar today. I just, can't thank you enough, but was wondering if you had any final thoughts for the audience and
Well,
some
I know
tips.
towards the end, I moved a little quickly because I realized that I was running out of time. But hopefully, if you have any direct questions, any comments or concerns, you can just send me an email. It's OE Liburd, O as in Oscar, E as in my middle name, Emmanuel, last name Liburd, Liburd, at University of Florida, UFL.edu. Again, OE Liburd, um, oeliburd@ufl.edu, and I'll be able to answer your questions directly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. And for everyone who joined us today, we also want to remind you that you can learn more about the Transition to Organic Partnership Program TOPP by visiting our website, www.foginfo.org. You can find out about this and many of the other work we're doing around the state and the region. We certainly appreciate Dr. Liburd and everybody who joined us today. Thank you so much. And please keep an eye for upcoming webinars in this series. Thank you.
Yeah, Ron, is there a number I can reach you at, or you don't want to? You can send me a text on that, email.
We can, yeah, certainly and in fact, let me see if I can just pull that up really quick here. So if you have any questions, you can call us at 352-377-6345 or email us by using our email setop@foginfo.org, or visit our website www.organictransition.org/region/southeast. We really appreciate you joining us today. We look forward to seeing you very soon.